What's up, gangsters? How about a finished project video? Yes, I actually have another one this year, and it's nice because I feel like I'm not going to have a lot of them. I just seem to be taking a lot longer to finish projects, and that's okay. I think I'm putting more and more into them each time, so kind of is what it is. But feels good to be doing a video. And it's been a few minutes since I did one, since I finished the Spitfire project, because I really didn't have much to say, and quite honestly, after that saga, I really was not interested in doing any videos. So I also wanted to do a much simpler and quicker project after spending so much time with the Spitfire, going deep on trying to get correct colors, doing research, and chasing details and all of that. Anyway, so for me, the perfect relaxer was to do a 1/10 scale bust. And because that's just a good way to work on painting, and I do want to improve my figure painting. And but I really went way off the map, and made it easy on myself by not even having to do any flesh tones because this is the bust I chose. This is, get it back in the light. This is the 1/10 scale brox, I guess that's his name, bust from Mirico. And as you can see, he is some kind of lizardy McLizard face and has no need of flesh tones. Well, at least not, the normal kind of flesh tones. Okay, that sounds racist. Gotta be careful about that these days. He does not have need of any standard Caucasian. Okay, is that standard? Yeah, anyway, he's not a white guy. No, whatever. Anyway, I'm just gonna shut up and we're gonna take a look at what I've managed to accomplish here with this alien type creature. How about that? Okay, so there you go. You can see what I mean about going about as far in the opposite direction of a Battle of Britain era Spitfire as I possibly could. There are certainly no historical color accuracy considerations on a project like this, and that's exactly what I wanted. To just have total creative freedom. And as you can see, I also wanted to do something with blue. I have been for a while. I've kind of been thinking about doing a Corsair or something like that, and I'm not quite, ready to go down that road yet. So, hey, why not a blue, lizard space guy? And because he kind of has lizard-like features, this is what I used as my main sort of reference or inspiration. Now, he's not perfectly lizard-like because, once you get in close, you can see that he doesn't really have scales all over his entire skin surface. It's just more kind of wrinkly and leathery. But this was a pretty good start for, kind of the colors that I was going after and kind of that basic look, and especially like around the eyes and the eyes themselves, because I didn't want him to have human-style eyeballs. So this was, I think, it was a good kind of basis, even if it wasn't a perfect reference. And there is no such thing as a perfect reference. Anyway, the other reference that I kind of had was I was able to find the actual original digital art over on ArtStation. And if you've never been to ArtStation, I highly recommend it. It's super cool. It's all 100% digital artistry, 3D stuff that people are doing using things like ZBrush, Blender, 3D Studio Max, that sort of thing to create the kind of stuff that can ultimately be 3D printed into figurines and busts. And there's just a lot of really neat stuff there. And the guy who did this is amazing. I mean, he is unbelievably talented to be able to do this kind of sculpting in the digital medium. But one thing it definitely shows is that there's a lot that gets lost in translation. The guys at Mirico did a really good job of throwing a casting off of this 3D print, but you can definitely see that some things got lost in the process. Like, the one thing that was the most irritating to me is if you look, like right there, that Fastex type buckle on his grenade belt or whatever that is, definitely not so good. You can see it right there, and that is only as good or as unobjectionable as it is because I spent some time carving at it with a very fine dental burr. You can get a better look at it right there on my Proxon to try and recover some of the detail that basically just wasn't there at all. So that was a little bit annoying. Another thing that I did this time that I think helped a little bit, one thing that always frustrates me when I get down to the point with figurines or whatever, to where I want to start really honing in my color separations, for example, between something like this grenade belt and his body, is that the corners are just not very sharp. They end up being kind of round, and so the color separations, when you try and black line with oil paint or put a wash in there or whatever, they just don't come out very crisp. So I spent a significant amount of time on this, basically rescribing it, just kind of taking some aircraft modeling technique and a good scriber and just going through and carving out all of these separations. And you can kind of see, like, in there where those dark gray things are next to the lighter gray collar or whatever you want to call that, to kind of just make that where it was crisper and where if I did end up wanting to use a wash, that it would be a lot tighter. And I think that was time well spent. I also got rid of a few details. There were some buckles and belts back here that just didn't look good because they just couldn't cast them properly to make them really look, in my opinion, convincing. Same thing, there was one over here on this shoulder piece. Got rid of that. I think that was a good move. So anyway, I made a few modifications, but in general, this was, I think, a really nice... sorry, my camera's acting a little goofy this morning. Anyway, this was a really nice overall bit of 3D print conversion to resin casting. The assembly was good and easy. Everything really did fit nice. It was well engineered with good assembly features. The only place that was a little bit tough was this nose horn thing didn't quite want to fit. It was a little too big. Had to do a little work to enlarge the opening on his nose to make that go in the way it was supposed to. But these larger horns, they were great. As you can see, there are some options in this little kit. You can have one horn broken off. You can give him a cigar. I chose to leave the cigar off and do the two big horns. So I think that overall it's pretty good. Now, so I would recommend this thing for anybody. Now, here's the bad news. You can't get one, or at least you probably won't be able to get one. And this is kind of the sad part of this story. Mirico, I think their website is still up as of today, which is July 11th, 2020. And this is a sad thing because they are no longer in business. They basically, if you can get anything from them, it's basically just closeout stock. And I got this for about $50 along with another one that I want to do, because I just recognized when I heard about them that I had better jump on it if I wanted to get one. And the reason that they went out of business, recasters. They basically just were losing money because these assholes who were buying originals and copying them and selling them as if they were the real thing, basically was costing them too many sales. And a lot of it was happening in China, and there's not a lot you can do about it. And basically, they just gave up, and it's really sad. And this is a real problem with these, busts and figurines that are done as garage kits in resin, especially when they're really good and really unique, like the Mirico stuff was. Because recasting is a real problem, and basically, yeah, you need to know about it, and you need to know that if you support it in any way, that's unethical, and you're a jerk. And I won't apologize for saying that. There are no qualifications on that statement. Anyway, enough about the kit itself. The painting was a real adventure for me, and I had a couple of goals. One is I wanted to do blue, and I wanted to make it really vibrant. The other was I wanted to work with acrylic inks. Well, before I got to that, though, I wanted to do as much of it as I could with my airbrush, and I wanted to use MRP lacquers. And so I mixed and blended some MRP blues. I think I mixed some Mr. Color basic blue in there at a certain point. And I did all of the blue first, and I did do all of the basic painting with an airbrush. Because, it's pretty big and relatively easy. And I basically did, what they call the zenithal method, where you're spraying from up above to give highlights and shadows as per light falling directly from above. And with something that's this big and has this much, sort of topographical relief, that's relatively easy. So I painted him black first, then painted him white, and that was a fail. MRP is just too translucent. And everything was just too dark, and I was losing all of my tonal variety. So I stripped him pretty quickly using, I actually just put some straight up lacquer thinner in my airbrush and just power washed him basically, and took all of the Mr. Surfacer 1500 primer and a couple of layers of MRP right off. It was messy, but it was quick and effective. Then I came back, reprimed him, and did it in Mr. Surfacer I think 1000 gray the second time, and that worked a lot better. Right? My colors were a lot more vibrant and easy to work with, and I was pretty happy with the way that I was able to do the shading, but it still did not really give me the look and the vibrance that I wanted, and that's when I started working with inks. And so the blue, I got a lot of work with a Winsor & Newton, let's see, it is, they just call it blue. I don't see, it's right back there. That's right there, that Winsor & Newton blue ink. It's really vibrant. And I found when I mixed it, mixing it about 50-50 with isopropyl alcohol at a minimum for spraying and shading. I was doing some of that. I also have added some Liquitex inks in there. I was able to do a lot of things with that, but where I really found it useful was kind of using it as like a sludge wash, where I blended it with aqua gloss, like 50-50 aqua gloss and water to about 10% ink and a little bit of flow aid, basically the magic wash that I've been kind of tinkering with and that I used some on my Spitfire project. I used some version of the magic wash here a lot, and it worked really, really well. I was happy with the way that I was able to kind of control the shading and get, kind of sneak up on it and get nice gradual blends, and do it in a way that did not involve, honestly, a lot of precision painting on my part, which was great because I suck at that. So I think that was a pretty decent strategy that just about anybody, honestly, could replicate. Once I had all of the base colors and the shading and kind of had it up to that point, I showed it to James Rice, who is an amazing figure painter. He's an SMCG. He has a neat company called Sabo Miniatures. If you've never checked them out, they do a lot of stuff. It's all military stuff, a lot of historical military type things. And he gave me some really good advice. He was like, look, you don't have to go for the total super high contrast if you don't want to, but you still need some more to make it pop. And that's where my final round of work came in, using oils. And so that's where I added some shading, like I increased the contrast on this shoulder piece, added in some browns to just make it look a little bit dirtier, kind of did some more shading there. Some of these like gradual gray tones down here were airbrushed with the Liquitex ink. Just really super thin carbon black. Like when I say thin, I mean 40-1, literally. And it's nice because you can just sneak up on that. And if you don't like it, you can remove it. I've been using 409. It's been working great. That's just something that I discovered kind of accidentally, that will it will very easily remove a basic ink that's been thinned with alcohol, but it'll also remove the magic wash. But anyway, back to the oils thing. Did some work with those to introduce some additional tones and highlight some of these edges to kind of bring out the detail on the belt. It's molded in detail, which is not necessarily the greatest, but I don't think I'm capable of really painting texture on something like that, so I'm happy to have it there. And then I used some raw umber tones on the horns. I think that came out pretty good. And then I mixed up some really, really light blues using ultramarine blue and titanium white to, essentially dry brush over the tops of all of these skin ridges to make them pop. Again, kind of using the idea that the light is coming from above. And then, I blended those in. And that really kind of gave me that final bit of drama that I was looking for. And you can kind of see it better when I get the light right. And I'm pretty happy with it. I think the skin tone is interesting and vibrant and eye-catching. And James kind of confirmed that for me, so I felt good about that. He was not super stoked with my choice of the orange collar because he felt like it took away too much of the your attention. But I was stuck on the orange thing. I like orange and blue. It's a great color combination, and I was always going to do the orange collar. Nobody was going to talk me out of that. Now, one trick that James got me on that worked out pretty well was to help me with the eyes. And we all know eyes are difficult. We're all justifiably terrified of doing eyeballs with figures. And so what I did, I sort of cheated, because I did not want him to have normal human eyeballs with a white surrounding, a colored iris and pupil. I wanted his eyeballs to definitely be more reptilian. So all I had to do after I painted them a kind of a bright yellowish orange was establish that round pupil. And James's trick that he gave me for that was basically chop off the tip of a toothpick until you've got it flat and round, and then just dip it in some oil paint that's kind of, and he said use it straight out of the tube. My black was a little bit too thick, so I thinned it with mineral spirits until it was kind of the thickness of what you would get out of a jar of Tester's enamel. And you basically just stick the toothpick in there and then use it as a stamp and stamp the little round dot right in place. And it worked wonderfully. And it's an easy thing to practice. You just do it a bunch of times until you're confident. Now, of course, because of Murphy's corollary of pairs, and if you're not familiar with that, that's the corollary of Murphy's law that says anytime you have a pair of things, if one of them goes perfectly, the other one is going to be a total fail. And yeah, so his left eye, first try, perfect. His right eye took about half a dozen tries. And the nice thing about doing it with oils is that I was obviously able to use a very, very small brush that was just moistened with mineral spirits and go in there and kind of tune up the shape a little bit to make sure that it was, in fact, round. So pretty happy with the way that worked out. So that's basically it. That's my little Lizardy McLizard face adventure. And I think, it was fun. I enjoyed the whole thing. This was about 3 weeks of pretty steady, tinkering and painting and shading and learning. And I also, one thing I forgot to mention is I also was a lot more disciplined with this when I was using acrylics, because I did have to hand paint some of this stuff with acrylics, which I just generally hate and try to avoid. But I was a lot more disciplined on this in using a wet palette, and that really does make a difference. I mean, it was definitely worth doing, and I was able to keep my acrylics relatively moist for quite a while, and didn't have the problems with them getting, tough to work with, and where they leave ugly brush marks and things like that. So overall, pretty happy, and definitely looking forward to doing something like this again. Okay, there you go. So that is my latest figure painting attempt. I kind of feel like this one might actually be my favorite so far. It's certainly not anything world class, but I feel like I did a pretty solid job on it. I feel like I learned some things, and it doesn't have any, one like thing about it that I know is there that's going to irritate me every time I look at it from here until the end of its life or my life or whatever. So I feel pretty good about it. And I hope that, the discussion about how I did it has been at least a little bit useful for any of you guys who might want to try and do something like this. So anyway, as always, I definitely appreciate you watching, and much love.